It's the most wonderful time of the year.
That was a really good. I liked that song you just, or that.
You like the tune? It's the most wonderful time of the year.
I liked the octave you went to.
And here's another one. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells.
All right.
I think that should be our intro.
Should we launch into it?
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to Queer Cinema Catchup. I'm Joe.
And I'm Allison.
And today we are talking about the movie Heretic. And we also have a very special guest, our producer and on-the-ground Heretic correspondent, William Schlaack. How are you, William?
I'm great. I am feeling very heretical today. So I'm excited to process some religious trauma with you guys.
Will's also our first returning guest. He appeared on our episode about Maxine back in the summer. So welcome back, Will.
Oof.
Oof.
Will has a negative opinion about Maxine.
Thinking about Maxine.
Heretic is a 2024 American psychological horror film written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. It stars Hugh Grant, Sophie Thatcher, and Chloe East, and follows two Mormon missionaries who attempt to convert a reclusive Englishman, only to realize he is more dangerous than he seems.
Spooky.
Well, Alice and I are in LA. Will's in Chicago. Yep. We saw it separately.
Yes.
Alice and I saw it a few days ago. Will saw it just yesterday. With a very fresh review with the directors.
Yeah. Was there like a Q&A after? What was it like? Just the
Yeah, so they had an introduction where they kind of introduced the film and talked a bit about like what their inspiration was behind it, and then there was a Q&A afterward, which was good. The moderator was not the best at asking questions.
I think that's like such a theme every time I go to Q&A.
I feel like you can't have a moderator who really wants to talk about their film analysis.
Yeah.
Oh geez, and there's Patty.
We also have Patty, another special guest. We love dogs.
The screening was also 35 millimeter, which was neat. However, I think I probably would have preferred to see this digitally because there were so many things that I kind of missed because it was so dark in certain scenes.
That's interesting. Well, I'm actually curious to hear you say that. Beck and Woods were talking about the ending, and they mentioned something like there are things happening in the background that might change your perception of what's occurring on screen. And I didn't really notice anything in the background. So
is that the director?
Yeah. The directors.
Beck Woods.
Well, Scott Beck and
Brian Woods,
a dynamic duo who went to college together at the University of Iowa and started a production company.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine going to school in Iowa and now working in LA making
I think they actually still work. I'm not positive about this, but I think their production company is in Iowa.
Yeah.
I'm sure they come to LA quite frequently. They also own a movie theater in Iowa called The Last Picture House in Davenport, Iowa. I mean, they seem pretty cool. They seem like cool dudes. You know, I'm impressed by them in that sense.
They are cool people. They've been best friends since they were 11 years old.
Aww.
They started making movies back when they were 11, kind of like you two. They have always had differing opinions on religion. And they've been talking about that since they were young. And so this is a screenplay they've been working on for the last 10 years. And one of the things that they mentioned was they're the writers of A Quiet Place, the first film. So they wanted to make a film that was the opposite of A Quiet Place, where it was primarily focused on dialogue.
I actually saw a quote. There was an inspiration of trying to go to a different place than we had been before, Beck says. The last couple of films have been free of dialogue, and this is the complete opposite of that. But I think the genesis of this tracks back to the 30-year relationship that Brian and I had as filmmakers and as best friends, having conversations about existentialism and religion and the unknowns that we find in life, how religion leads many people to try and find answers to the unknown and try to find comfort in what happens after you die. The greatest fear we have and the greatest question that we are pursuing. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
As of lately, I watch movies and there's always like a scene of a really long monologue and I kind of roll my eyes in the back of my head. And the only thing that comes immediately to my mind is in the movie Us, when what's her name basically is at the chalkboard and spends like what feels like 20 minutes explaining the whole goddamn plot. And I'm just like, you just unraveled any mystery of this movie. Hugh Grant has a long monologue in this movie Heretic. I loved every second of it. I thought it was so well written. I thought it was so well performed and delivered. Like, I can't decide if it's like just because it was so strongly written and like Hugh Grant elevated it, or if it were the hands of any other actor, if they wouldn't have been able to deliver quite the same performance.
To contrast that monologue from Us with the monologue in the movie Heretic is, she is explaining the plot. Lapita is. I found that more effective, but I can see why that would be kind of hey, I am watching this movie. You have to tell me exactly what's going on in this like long monologue. But in Heretic, he's not telling you the plot. In fact, you still have no idea what's about to happen, but you're just getting more insight into his beliefs and why he's trapped these girls in his home. It wasn't just focused on him. It was like flashes to the Monopoly games and to the pictures on the wall. And I guess just for the listeners, the monologue is about how, as a culture, as people, we iterate through the years, and that especially is true of religion. And he used Monopoly as a analogy where the original game, which I had no idea was created by a woman who created something called the Landowners something. And then the Monopoly we all know and love came out. And then later on, there's been all these knockoff versions of Monopoly. And he kind of compared that to religion and said, like, the OG religion is Judaism. And then from there, we've got Christianity. And then there's Islam. And then there's all the, like, fast food of religions. And he said, like, these stories have existed throughout all time. And basically trying to get these girls to admit that they maybe should have more disbelief than they think. Anyway, but I liked it, is what I'm trying. Long-winded way of saying I was pro.
I was pro as well. I think that those two monologues serve two very different purposes.
Wait, what was the second monologue?
The Us monologue.
Us monologue. Yeah. What I liked about this movie was like how tight the script was for the first half, because it felt like almost a lecture. And I really liked that being intellectually stimulated, where Us is more about revealing what the whole film is about. This is educational, and that is expository. I think that's why I enjoyed this one so much more. However, I think this leads into like the larger conversation about, is this film effective or not? I don't think that lends itself well to cinema.
It was too talky for you?
No, I like how talky it was, but I was saying, like, is this the best medium for this kind of dialogue? The first 2/3 would work really well on stage. Like,
it would be a great play.
It lends itself to like the more theatrical and outlandish elements of like how funny it was. The film was quite funny.
It was.
Maybe this is just a music box thing, but the whole theater was laughing throughout most of the movie.
I think people were laughing. I don't remember.
Actually, you and I were laughing.
That happens all the time.
A lot of people weren't laughing in this movie.
Oh, I guess you're right. I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I definitely think, dialogue-driven films, there's a question as to, is that the best medium for the story? But I liked it as a film. And I don't know if that's because the performances were so captivating. There were so many like close-ups and things like that you kind of added to the story, or if it's because the elements that came next with the prophet and the dark basement cellar, that was really creepy to me, and I enjoyed seeing that on film. I do think they could have maybe done more with the kind of like, you're trapped in a basement with a scary man and he's trying to convince you of this like fake religion he's made up, and they could have pushed that harder, I don't know, and made it even more like visually tense.
Well, maybe my opinion of the movie is somewhere in between both your reactions to it. I really enjoyed it, and I was really entertained the whole time. However, Allison and I both, after seeing the movie, Allison's been like with her friends, she's just been like, oh, like I definitely got to go back and rewatch it. I'd like go see the movie theater again, where I kind of am like one and done. I'm like, I really enjoyed my experience, but there's like not anything really compelling me to like want to see it again on the big screen.
I guess I would just want to see it again to kind of live in that intellectual space, or even it's intellectual, of course, but also just like a spiritual space where you're like, what do I actually think, based on what he's saying, based on these girls who are so rooted in belief. Like, I kind of liked it in that way, and I'd like to watch it again and kind of track their journeys and his manipulation, even though like it's very obvious that he's a dangerous man from immediately. They should not have entered his home, period.
But do you think that those questions and conversations that you could have are best served by this film, or is it better to have those conversations outside of this, and this is like a conversation starter and it's like more of a one and done?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just think both. Like, I wouldn't mind watching it again, and then of course I wouldn't talk about those things because I kind of am an existential person.
I think absolutely, like, it's more to serve as a conversation starter, because I think the movie did a really good job. When Hugh Grant his character shows up, going into this movie, I assumed that he was like a deeply religious person, and he didn't believe that they were as faithful as they were claiming they were. And
oh, really?
Put them
That's
through these trials and tribulations to prove their faith. But then when he was like going into detail about all the different religions, I was like, oh, actually, he's really against religion.
That's interesting.
And then when they go into the basement and they talk about the prophet who he's going to bring back to life, I was like, oh my gosh, wait, he actually is really religious. So I kind of was like going like back and forth throughout the movie. I thought that was really effective for me. And so I think it kind of helped when we're talking about, is this a conversation starter or not? Or is this movie supposed to give you all the answers as you're watching? And I feel like for me personally, when I was watching it, it was like kind of making arguments for like both sides and kind of like helping. Like I was kind of like, oh, I can see it from this side. I can see it from that side. And that's even divided between the two Mormon women, the test of choosing between a door that Hugh Grant's written belief or disbelief on it. And one person goes to the disbelief door because they think that's what Hugh Grant wants. Whereas the other person's seeing this more as a trial and to like go and see even more of their faith and choose the belief door.
Yeah, she said, I think this is an experiment that he's been watching us and we should just do what we really think.
And so what's interesting about that is they're both choosing a door not based on their true beliefs, because also in my opinion, they both choose a door that's opposite to how they actually feel. They're just doing it in reaction to Hugh Grant, which kind of reminds me of in the movie The Others that we talked about a few episodes away, when Nicole Kidman is with her children. Have you seen that movie, Will?
No.
Do you know what happens?
No.
I won't spoil.
Okay.
I'll just tell one scene.
Okay.
Nicole Kidman's a devout Catholic, and she's teaching her children, I think it's like in the 1940s.
Yes.
She's teaching her two children about Christ, and they're talking about the past and how there were some people that were being questioned by the Romans on their faith, and they were determined to proclaim that they believe in Jesus, and the Romans ended up killing them.
They were children too, I think.
Nicole Kidman's children start giggling, and Nicole's like, why are you giggling? And they're like, well, why would you like die for Christ? Like, sure, I'd believe that he's real on the inside, but I wouldn't say it on the outside if I knew he was going to kill me. And then Nicole Kidman goes, no, you need to always accept Christ. You could never deny him or you'll go to hell. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of this hiding your, like what you truly believe and like masking yourself and in reaction to like,
which is what his whole
to this extreme of like Hugh Grant is the Roman in a way. Like,
well, it's like kind of speaking to what Hugh Grant is trying to prove to these girls, that religion's about control. So that supports what you're saying. But I would counter and say, I don't believe that the girl who chooses the belief door, Sophie Thatcher, I don't think that she doesn't believe. I think when she says the next line where she says, your argument here is missing a whole spectrum in between. I think that she is just the fact that she has birth control but is still on a mission. I think that she is a person who kind of lives in between and understands that there's the control aspect of religion, but there's also the faith aspect of religion. I think she just has like a more curious, robust mind or like a flexible mind, I guess, than either his perspective or maybe the younger. Well, I guess she's probably the same age. The other girl.
You're totally right on that, because she came to the Mormon faith later in life.
Yeah,
her family, they were doing research to different like religions, whereas the other woman, she'd grown up in the faith.
Yeah.
So she like never had to really question or kind of analyze these different religions. So the Yellow Jackets person, I forget her name.
Sophie Thatcher.
She just seems to be much more of she's like inquisitive and always questioning things, but it's not. Yeah, you're right. Like, she's not doubting her faith per se. I mean, we never really get like
there's
true
not really
insight.
a strong answer. Yeah, but
which isn't really like essential to the question that's being asked.
It's more just my interpretation based on the things she says next.
Yeah. It's like her family chose to be Mormon, and then the other person was born into it.
And after a tragedy too, her father died of Lou Gehrig's disease, and then they went back.
But all of us, I think, what all ties the three of us together is we were raised Catholic.
Which we say on many episodes.
Just like there's different spectrums of queerness, there's also different spectrums of Catholicism. And I'm always surprised to discover just how differently under the same church can be practiced differently, because Alice and I were really raised in like the Seattle area. And I'd say we had like a very much like more like liberal.
Yeah, our church in Seattle was extremely liberal. We didn't even have to kneel during Mass.
They do
now. Okay,
yeah.
Times have changed. And we had our first reconciliation, which is sort of like when you tell the priest all your sins when you're in fourth grade, which makes a lot of sense when you have sins when you're in fourth grade. But and then you're supposed to do that every week, but we never had to do it after the first sacrament.
Yours was in fourth grade?
Maybe it was second grade. I don't remember.
It was fourth grade for me.
So, and our teachers really focused on social justice, and the parts of Catholicism that are like help the poor and the vulnerable, which really resonated with me as a young person. And then I moved to Pennsylvania and went to a more conservative high school with a different kind of focus on Catholicism. And it was much more on the kind of social rules about, or the sexual social rules, and it's much more like textualism and things like that, that was kind of disheartening to me as somebody who really responded to what I had gotten from our school in Seattle.
Yeah, I was completely conservative. It's interesting. Well, somebody who I worked with back when I was in like 7th grade, 8th grade, at like a Catholic camp, said that there are two kinds of Catholic, and this is very, very, very like black and white, and I don't believe this at all, but it does help just kind of understand the extremities of like Catholicism. So there's the feed the poor Catholics, and then there's the pro-life Catholics or anti-abortion Catholics, and you can either like sit in one of those, and that's like your one issue, like you're a single issue voter. That's how some people like view Catholicism.
I was always hearing of like the cafeteria Catholics who like take what they like and leave what they don't.
Yes, which was like we were brought up. We talked a lot about that in school, saying like you cannot be a cafeteria Catholic. Like that is
bad.
Then you're not an actual Catholic.
Which is super contrasted to, we had a religion teacher tell us that the way to inform your conscience was to consider what the church says, to consider what scripture says, to consider what your community says, and then to look inside of yourself and think about what your own conscience says. And I'm pretty sure he told us that the most important factor is what you internally believe, which is like relativism, which is not very Catholic. But I'm really grateful for the lesson. I'm really, I really appreciate the way he taught us as opposed to a more strict version.
Well, that leads into kind of what the thesis of this film is, as an attack on certainty, which is, I am 100% certain that this is the one religion. And that ties into Hugh Grant's, or Mr. Reed, which I keep thinking is mystery. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I bet that is intentional, maybe.
Probably, maybe.
Whoa.
Wait, that's so funny they use the word certainty and uncertainty, because that's literally in the movie Conclave, which you haven't seen yet.
I don't remember that part.
To say that the most dangerous thing in religion is certainty.
Oh yeah, that was a good part.
Because there's like, within the movie Conclave, it's kind of this fight between kind of what we're talking. Oh God, this would have been a really good double feature. It's kind of the fight between the more like liberal approach to Catholicism and the more conservative look at Catholicism, where it's like people are like, we need to open our doors so we can get more followers, and other people are like, we need to close the doors and keep what we have. So it's like a very interesting approach. But yeah, sorry, continue.
Yes.
No, I was just saying, like, that's like walking into somebody's home and they want to play Monopoly, and then I pull out the Monopoly with a credit card and saying like, no, this is the one that we have to play, and then you like throw out their copy of Monopoly and like, I'm going to get you this one, and
it's the only real Monopoly.
To kind of go into more of the Hugh Grant, what he's talking about that we've alluded to is, it's still in like the early part of the movie. The women come to this man's house, and now they're pretty much realizing that they are trapped. They're told that the only way that they can leave the house is
through the back door.
Through the back door, because the front door's on a timer and cannot be reopened until the morning. And then the Yellow Jackets person is like, well, it's very odd that you have a timer on your front door that can only be unlocked in the morning. And then Hugh Grant's like, yes, I guess I could see how that is strange. And Hugh Grant as a villain too, he just cracks me up just because he took such a different approach to it. Is he's kind of like his Hugh Grant romantic comedian self, but just an insane monster trapping these women. But so Hugh Grant, he is telling these women, basically describing all of religion and kind of pulling like a Meryl Streep's monologue in Devil Wears Prada, where Anne Hathaway is talking how she's on to fashion. And then Meryl Streep breaks down how every piece that she's been wearing has actually been curated for someone like her. It's kind of like what Hugh Grant's doing with religion. And I think it was like so interesting as he really like dumbs it down, but in a really like articulate and fun way. And he starts off with board games, which I think is so smart because he's basically about to send these women on
a game,
kind of game quest. And he starts with the game Monopoly. And he starts like being like, do you realize that Monopoly, this actually isn't the original. The original version of it was the Landlord's game, which was a precursor to Monopoly. And it was invented by a woman, Elizabeth Maggie.
Justice for Elizabeth Maggie.
The game had mechanics similar to what now is seen in Monopoly, including the concept of property trading, rent collection, and the use of spaces like Go and Jail. However, the game was later adapted and popularized by Charles Darrow, who is often credited with creating Monopoly.
And sold it to
Parker Brothers, who then bought the rights to it in 1935.
For a lot of money.
While Darrow received royalties and fame for Monopoly, Elizabeth Maggie received little recognition for her earlier invention, and it wasn't until much later that her contributions were acknowledged. And while Hugh Grant's describing the original version and how that all got swept under the rug and the Parker Brothers, their version came to light, and that's what everyone knows now. In the background, Hugh Grant's playing this song, which is called The Air That I Breathe by the band The Hollies. And it's playing over and over again in the background. I think it shuts off at one point. He has to restart it on, he's playing it on vinyl disc. And then he's pointing out that not only is there this original version of Monopoly, there's all these just different variations. And each one is getting just more and more ridiculous as it goes on. Like Will, you mentioned, there's the credit card version of Monopoly.
I wish I could remember the ones in the movie too. They were
there's
such silly ones.
dog Monopoly. There's movie themed Monopoly. There's every single type of Monopoly you can imagine. There's a Monopoly of it. And they all are from this original Monopoly version, you think. But then as Hugh Grant described, there's actually a version before. There's the Landlord's game that nobody remembers. So you're like, oh my gosh, okay. So then you're starting to tie it to religion. It's like, okay, there was this fundamental idea of
one God, monotheistic
one God,
religions.
And then just in different countries and different time periods, it's just how it transferred and changed over time. And not even just with Christianity. There's he was mentioning the Bible, the Quran, there all these different.
He was talking to you about the myths of someone dying and resurrecting,
yes,
being around for basically all of human history, and
Hare Krishna, like Hinduism, Buddhism, breaking it down, how all these different similarities, how we think it's so different, but there's a lot of similar themes in each one.
And one thing about that with the scene that was really effective, I thought, because even though it is a he's very charming at delivering the monologue, but also the tension I think came from the fact that behind them there was this curtain.
That was great.
With it looked like a human
crouching
and you knew you'd already had a fake out with a statue scare where the girls had to go down this one hallway and there's this man standing in the hallway and it's just a statue. But so as he's talking, the girls are looking around the room looking for things that might help them. They notice the statue behind them and there's just this eeriness of what's about to happen, and then he does pull the curtain off and it's revealed to be some sort of religious icon. And there's all these paintings of the different myths, resurrection myths that have existed throughout history. And he keeps talking about how this is just an iteration. And he also, I feel like it's important to say, tied religion to capitalism in the sense that that's why he used the Monopoly analogy, because he was suggesting that these girls as missionaries are really just trying to sell their version of religion to the masses.
Mm-hmm. Which is what the opening scene was talking about as well with condoms.
Yeah.
Yes, saying oh, this is bigger. The Magnum condom is bigger. It's just well, is it? Or have we just been told that?
Yeah.
And that just kind of sets up the whole thing. It's a fantastic opening sequence because it's really funny.
And it's also really good because it suggests, both because of hints of the themes and because it suggests that Sophie Thatcher's character, perhaps, that they both know more about sex than they perhaps pretend, which is very important later on. It's very smart. It's a very good use of 5 minutes of screen time. Anyway, sorry, Joe, continue.
And then, so this song's playing over and over again, The Air That I Breathe. And then Hugh Grant's do you recognize this song? And they're like, no, we don't. They're like, yes, you do. Basically, Radiohead took this song for Creep and used inspiration. They went to court over it. And he's like, oh, is that not recent enough for you? Lana Del Rey's Get Free was also claimed to have been stolen from Creep.
And they sued her too, right?
They sued her too. So Radiohead sued Lana Del Rey. So it's just repeating it over and over time, and how everything just gets changed over time, slowly over time. And that's where it comes back to kind of the fast food. How you start out with one product, the food comes from the source, then it gets broken down until you get left with a little shitty Big Mac.
Did you notice that the Lana song was the credit
I didn't know
the credits. I'm pretty sure it was, which is kind of
the
fun.
gay gasps around me when Lana Del Rey was mentioned were insane.
Which I actually don't know. I Get Free. I'm not familiar with that song.
It was playing as we were leaving the theater. I'm pretty sure. But see, I find that like, and I think that what was so good about this movie is that's very convincing, and he's able to kind of speak to it very eloquently. He's obviously been waiting to capture these girls or whoever stumbles into his path for a while. But then Sophie Catcher's character says something like, you brought up Judaism and said they're not good at marketing their religion and that's why they're the smallest, but you didn't mention the Holocaust. Or she says, you've mentioned that these mythical stories have existed forever, but you're ignoring all of the differences between them. And just like kind of fighting back. And I quite enjoyed that. And I really enjoyed what she says later to the other girl who's a little bit more naive, a lot more scared. And she says, like, we're not a physical threat to him, but we can be an intellectual one. And so we need to use our brains to kind of fight back against him and disarm him in that way. And then she also gives the other girl a letter opener to essentially stab him.
What are the character names? I'm getting a little lost in the pronouns.
Sister Barnes is Sophie Thatcher, and Sister Paxton is Chloe.
Barnes and Paxton.
And Barnes is Thatcher. I might be easier to say Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, but we can do Barnes and Paxton.
Thatcher, and what's Chloe's last name?
East. And both of those girls, Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, are ex-Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
Which I find interesting.
Wow. And one of the producers of the film, who's a good friend, is ex-Mormon as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'd say, for as much as I enjoyed it, I never really knew where the movie was going. It was really exciting in that sense. I think the thing that rubbed me the wrong way a bit, and it's not the biggest thing, but Chloe East, her character, when it's like she's seen as so naive in the beginning of the movie and just like willing to like accept, or she like apologizes even when Hugh Grant is trying to be a monster. They're going into the basement. She's like, "Thank you for your blah, blah, blah."
I related.
And I do think what didn't ring true to me is like Chloe East, when she like is able to like recount that she thinks that we haven't really described the prophet yet, but that the prophet ate this blueberry pie and then came back to life. She didn't believe that it was the same person. There was actually a body double and it was like swapped out. I was like, where the hell does she have time to think this? And then at the end too, when Hugh Grant, it's revealed that he has all these women caged in a basement. And then he's like, do you now understand what I've been telling you? And she's like, yes, control. I'm like, at what point this journey did Chloe East like make these discoveries? Like that's where it just felt like overreaching to me. And I didn't quite believe how she got to that point.
So just for the audience, I suppose we'll say, basically they have to choose these doors to quote unquote get out of the house, but they lead to a dark basement with no way out. And once they're stuck down there, Hugh Grant sends down this woman dressed in scary veils and seems very like ill and frightening, and does some kind of weird proselytizing. Is that how you say that word?
That also was
creepy.
Creepy.
It creeped me out. But anyway, and then she eats a blueberry pie that's laced with poison. He tells the girls, you're going to watch a miracle tonight. She's going to come back to life. I'm going to show you the one true religion. And then the doorbell rings, so there's like a distraction. The girls go back up the stairs, even though the door's locked. And
Topher Grace is in this movie, but doesn't have anything much to do with the plot.
I think it was a misdirect, because I thought
definitely a misdirect. But I just kind of like, okay, it wasn't needed. I don't think.
I do think it was needed. I think they needed like another element. I wish that he had more to do. Like I think they needed someone trying to get in the house.
They needed more to do. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't think it was like not. I think they needed to have a fourth character. Yeah. So then when they go back downstairs, they have this little argument, the girls, because it looks like the woman who's been called the prophet has been moved, even though she's dead. And so my problem isn't so much that I liked that Chloe East's character was naive and timid and not as maybe informed or intellectual as her companion, but that she was still smart and was able to figure out what was going on. But I had a little bit of plot questions of like, all right, if like a really old decrepit woman died in the basement and then another really old decrepit woman came up from another basement beneath this dark basement and then threw the body down and then acted dead, there wasn't enough time for that to happen, and it would have been really loud.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's why I was like so caught up in like the logistics of how that was all going, that whatever journey Chloe East was going on, I feel like I was supposed to like identify with her. That's why like when Hugh Grant is like, you realize what all this is about. And when she answers control, I feel like as an audience person, I should have like also had that answer at the same time she arrived to it. But instead I was like, no, like what is and then she says control. I was like, oh, I feel like at that point as an audience person, I should have been in on like her thinking, but I wasn't. And maybe like you said, it was because I was so caught up in the logistics of the prophet. And I'm kind of like that part of the movie. I'm a little bit like, I'm glad that they kind of just went for this like out of left field. I had no idea it was coming. And it's really like an important part of the story. It's not just like random. Like he's trapping all these women down there. But
how did he do that too? Who are those women?
How is he doing this and why is he doing this? And how often is he bringing over Mormon people and questioning their religion? Like, wouldn't they all notice?
I think they might have been from all kinds of faiths because they would have noticed. They would have noticed.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people to go missing.
Is the idea then that he takes the women or whomever who visit and they become...
That's what I think. So. But then also it seems like everyone that was caged, I mean, they all were starving and dressed in the same clothing, but I was like, are they all from the same
family
religion where they have to devoutly believe? I don't know. It's just like,
I don't think they really do believe. I mean, I think that was the idea that, and this is also kind of weak, I thought, but the prophet, the switched out prophet then comes back to life and gives a revelation to the sisters and says, I went to a place with cloud, like it basically describes what they say as a near-death experience. But then she says, but this isn't real, which is supposed to be what tips off the girls that this is a lie as well. And so I guess the idea is that the people who are trapped don't really believe what he's telling them, but they just have no choice because they're under his thumb.
Yeah. And he chops off her finger.
Yeah. I just don't think like, I don't know how to explain this. I just don't think like.
Why would she go through with this whole performance of switching out the bodies? Like, why would she immediately just be like, this guy has us trapped and he's going to track you too, or you're fucked? Like, why would she just like go along with it?
I think that is because you're like, Stockholm syndrome. Like, I think that she wanted to help, but she's afraid of this man who did just kill her other caged companion. I don't think she has a much of a choice, is my interpretation of that. I mean, it's also an insane situation, so I don't really know.
Yeah, this is where the movie kind of falls apart for me, where I understand what they're trying to say. I think that how it's done just needs a little bit more polish.
I'd scratch the whole. It turned into like the movie The Illusionist. I'm like, what? This is like a magician movie now.
I wouldn't like scrap it. I would change the logistics. Like, I think the trapdoor being underneath the basement, and he was covered in mud too. Like, there was no way. It would have been very difficult to pull that up.
I loved the fact that in the first room there were two doors, belief and disbelief. I was hoping that each chamber that they went into would be a new presentation where they again had to choose between belief or disbelief. Mm-hmm. I would have liked that more. I'd honestly scrap the other people and I would just make each room a different puzzle. Like, that's what I was thinking was going to happen. But then when you like bring in like the person, I'm like, oh, this is kind of barbarian-esque going into the basement. And then there's like the creepy monster down there, but maybe the monster isn't actually a monster. Oh, it's like another human being. I was just like, that part of it. That's where I'm like, I'm not very excited. I would be bored watching this on rewatch because there's like nothing I'm not like, you have to see when this happens in this movie.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff, Hugh Grant's monologue upstairs with the Monopoly stuff, I would absolutely recommend as like a memorable scene. But everything afterwards, there's nothing that I'm like clamoring for. Like, you have to see when she comes back to life and smashes him with the 3 nails in the head. You've got to see. It's
well,
just
that's
like,
later.
I
I don't know. I understand what you're saying, but I liked the idea that he's trying to create his own religion, even if he didn't really believe in it. And then I liked there were enough narrative surprises to keep me going. Like, I did not expect Sophie Thatcher to die in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, that was good.
Like, and they had this plan, Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, to stab him themselves. And you think that's about to happen because they have a code word. But then instead, the way they like shot it.
What's the code word?
Magic underwear. Magic underwear.
Which is brilliantly utilized twice.
3 times, really, because she gets made fun of for the magic underwear.
Well, yeah, that's the setup, so you know the importance of it. But they have this code word, magic underwear. And just as Sophie's about to say the words, you see like an extreme close-up of someone's neck being slit, and you don't quite know whose it is. And it's like, that was like such a great editing moment because you're like, what did they kill him? Like, what's going on? And then you realize it's Sophie that got her neck slit.
Was so
and then you're like, wait a
devastating.
minute. She's like the main character. If anything, I thought Chloe East was going to die.
Yeah.
Sophie can't die. Even if she's like gurgling and bleeding on the ground, like, surely they're going to patch this up and save her.
Yeah.
Right? She can't be the one that dies.
Well, and he keeps saying like, oh, she can't come back to life because she's fake. Like, I just thought that was like, and then he dug into her wrist.
Oh.
It was
And then
so
he's like-
disturbing.
He's like, oh no, that's a vein. And
Yeah.
no.
It was so upsetting. And then he tries to trick Chloe and say she's like a robot basically, and here's this little thing, and it's birth control. And anyway, so that was that was what kept me invested, was that kind of shift. It's like, oh, this isn't going to be a movie about two girls anymore. It's going to be about Chloe East. I was not expecting that. And then I also just really appreciated the ending, the twist that, you know, Chloe East manages to stab Hugh Grant and then tries to escape. She can't escape.
Well, that's the third. There's like the magic underwear thing. What's so great is it comes back a third time. Is Hugh Grant has Chloe East trapped in the room with all the other women, and he's like walking up really close to her and basically kind of just again like raining down on why like Mormonism isn't
Or any
right, or
religion.
how they have control over you. And then he says the words magic underwear, and that's when Chloe East
Stabs
follows
him
through and
again.
stabs him. And then another setup point too is earlier in the movie is they're talking about death, like where do you go when you die? And Chloe East's character says that when I die, I'd like to come back as a butterfly
And land on the
I'd land
fingers.
very specifically on someone's hand.
But yeah, so then what I just appreciate about the ending sequence is like she stabs him, she tries to escape. He's able to come after her and hurt her again or stab her. And so I thought this was going to be a very bleak ending where they both die. And it was kind of beautiful in the sense that Chloe East is like, I know prayer doesn't work. There's like the Great Prayer Experiment where they tried it in hospitals and it had no impact, but it's beautiful that we do pray for one another. And you think she's going to kind of die with this statement of belief that it's like not really about whether it's true or not, but about thinking about other people. But
There's also
instead,
another setup thing really quick to insert is earlier in the movie too. I forget who brings it up, but they say when you are about to die, your brain does amazing things and can like show you the afterlife. I think it's like when that first prophet dies and claims to see clouds.
Yes.
Is Sophie says that
She had an experience.
She had an experience
getting poisoned on Taco Bell as a child.
Yeah, where your like brain just does like crazy things and can take you to different places. So okay.
So yeah. So then I was like both like, oh, this is kind of beautiful thematically, but also I'm so upset that both of these girls died and this gross man is lying on top of her about to stab her and they're both going to be dead. It was kind of getting annoyed. And then all of a sudden, like Sophie Thatcher, who has been, you know, bleeding out now for probably like an hour, like emerges and she picks up this wooden plank with nails in it that they had used earlier to try and escape and whacks Hugh Grant. He dies. And then Chloe East, you know, bleeding out, is able to figure out how to get out of the house. And then her cell phone starts to work. She calls the police. She's in a beautiful snowy field and a butterfly lands on her hands. And then the movie ends. And so I liked I liked the surprises and the interpretations that can be read into that, because there's just so many ways to read it. And I love that. I had no idea Sophie Thatcher would pop back up, and I think that was brilliant because you could have a scientific explanation. Maybe she had enough life left in her. It could be a miracle. It could be a hallucination. Yes. There's so many explanations, and that's what made me really like the movie. I love a good ending. Ending.
I also enjoyed the ending, and I know some people in my group who saw it thought it was a cop-out. I like how it was Deus Ex Machina. Like, it is by the power of God. Like,
that's exactly. Yes. It's like, like this is what this movie, maybe there are miracles, maybe there are not, you know, it's just like, it's such a fun way to play with the themes of the movie. And then to make you leave the theater and talk to your friends about what you believe. Right. I think it's really smart.
And I think that's what the film is ultimately about. It's not about like religiosity. It's about faith, and it's about what people believe and how different people can see and read into different things in different ways, and each of those are valid and beautiful because that came from that individual's experience. What the film is just like saying about like, you need to stop disavowing other people's experiences and truths just because you think yours is like the number one.
And don't use those beliefs to control other people. You know, that's not what it should be about. And what do we have thoughts on what we think really happened?
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, you described like the plot of what we saw on screen, but what's your interpretation of what happened?
I mean, I immediately, the second, when Sophie Thatcher popped back up, I thought, oh, this is so cool. Like, this is supposed to be like a miracle. You're supposed to be debating if this is a miracle, or is that just, somehow she was able to, with her last gasp of life, like somehow she survived this long period of time, even though it's a little bit unbelievable. Unbelievable things happen in medicine every day. And like, is it science or is it like faith, or what I'm saying? That's what I thought the question was going to be. But then when she escaped the house and the butterfly landed on her finger, which is a direct callback to how she hoped to come back after she died, and also like just with all the conversation they had about after near-death experiences, she was in like a place with like a lot of blue sky, and it was very beautiful. So I was like, oh, she might already be dead. And then I kind of was, as the credits were rolling, I was kind of going back thinking, well, did she die as she was trying to escape? Did she die, maybe when Hugh Grant was on top of her about to stab her before Sophie thought, like, was that all imagined as well? And I don't really have a strong opinion on if I think one or the other. I think it's the interpretation that matters. And I guess as a person who wants to believe in good things, I would rather choose to believe that she lived, even though I can see very clearly how that might not be the case. But I just like the idea that one of those girls survived this horrific experience. And that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with hope.
Well,
I'm also going with hope because I think that the film is about belief and believing. And she was the one person who believed the entire way through, and like her. Well, that's not true, because she also was like, take the non-belief door, which also interesting. That's a side tangent, but I think it's also fascinating that both doors led down to the same place.
Yes,
yeah, that was good. That was smart.
It's very cool. But I also think that it was a positive ending, and that she did make it out, and that the butterfly was just a way of showing.
Or it was Sophie, maybe it was Sophie coming back to tell her.
That's a little too neat. to like tie up with a bow. But one of the things that was interesting that the director said afterward was like they purposely wrote that this film had no like climax. And it just felt like it kind of ended.
Interesting.
Because they wanted to like mimic like faith, like religious disappointment. And I can definitely see that, where this girl has been raised in one way of thinking, one way of life, and she's being exposed to so many other versions and so many other things that like when she's at death's door, she needs to muster up anything that she can have and any belief that she has or faith in herself, and push through. And kind of like, I don't know. Now I'm just talking.
No,
I like that idea.
I like that.
I don't think I think there was absolutely a climax, and it happens when Chloe East gets stabbed in the stomach. It's like all leading to her like trying to escape, and then Hugh Grant stabs her, and then it's them like bleeding out on the ground, and that's kind of like, it's a quick ending, but I think it all like leads to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where the 35mm print came into an issue with me. I did not see that he had a knife at her neck.
Oh my gosh.
So this entire time I thought he was just going up to her being like, pray for me, pray for me, pray for me.
Yeah.
And then somebody afterward was like, no, he had a knife.
I mean, it was a little bit like, I also didn't see it right away. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, even though he wants to criticize religion so fiercely, in the end, he needs it, or he's admiring her commitment to this belief. And then I saw the knife, and I was like, oh no, it's not what's going on.
But so you both are saying your interpretations of the ending is that Chloe East gets stabbed in the stomach. She's lying on the ground, and then someone whose neck has been slit, who bled out hours ago, got off the ground, walked over, and grabbed a wooden plank, and had the energy to use all her momentum to smack the 3 nails into Hugh Grant's head. Then Chloe East, who's been stabbed in the stomach in a place where you bleed a lot, was able to crawl out of a window, run outside in the cold snow in the middle of nowhere, and then make it back to safety and survive. That's what you both are saying.
I think I'm choosing to believe. That's
You're choosing to believe. That's good.
I also think that's a very specific sequence of events that the brain, they said, is always the same. Like you see the blue sky, you see whatever, and that was a pretty elaborate near-death experience if that was what was going on. Like that's a lot of stuff. A lot of things happened.
Yeah, because the brain could do elaborate things.
I also think that you could say the same thing. I think the way that you just broke that down is also the way that people go, you believe that Jesus Christ was born of a virgin and then he died and rose again. Like,
exactly.
But there's like the spectrum in between. It's like you can believe that there was, you can believe it very literally, or you can be like, maybe Mary was a person who told a story because she didn't want to get in trouble. And then there was a man who had really nice ideas about how to help people and be with the poor and vulnerable, and he died, and we don't know what happened next. And then people told the story about resurrection. You know, there's like multiple ways to interpret things.
When I was in 7th grade, our religion teacher, he was like in class with us. He's like, he sat us all down in a room in my religion class, and he's like, he shut the door behind him. He's like, you guys, I want you to join this club that I'm in. And, you know, some people aren't too, you know, hot about it. In fact, they've killed people for joining this club, but I want you all to join. And in this club, you know, there's this guy. We follow him. He's our leader. But we also, in this club, we are cannibals. And we eat bodies and we drink blood. Would you join? And then people at the class were like, no. And then our teacher's like, well, that's Catholicism. You believe. And he was saying how, like, you know, Catholicism, like, do you believe that you like literally eat the body and drink the blood of Christ every weekend? I was like, no, that's insane. It's symbolic. And he's like, well, no, you believe that it's literally Jesus' body and Jesus' blood every week. And I was like, what? And at that age, I think that was like the first time I was like really questioning, like, wait, what is the deal with this? I started having like a more critical mind, and the seed was planted.
He did that to us as well. And I'll just add in a detail where he like came in, he slammed the door shut.
Oh, that's right.
And he was like running around the classroom, and he was saying like, there's a new cult. Maybe he did differently for us. He's like, there's a new cult in town. They're very dangerous. And he was like really scaring us. And he's like, but guess what? You're already in it. And we were like, what? And then I guess the point was, as I recall, he was trying to demonstrate how the Romans viewed like the cat, like how it was a dangerous cult. Anyway, but I'm guessing you think that
did the Romans like eventually embrace Catholicism?
Yeah, when Constantine the emperor died, he converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. A lot of
flip-flopping, and then put the crosses on all the shields.
So you don't believe your ending is that she died?
Well, we can do your little fancy like, oh my gosh, I want to believe that they survived.
But come on, fancy, it's real.
Come on, Chloe East died down there.
I don't know. I saw her phone dropped into the snow. Why would you think the whole thing is made up?
Yeah,
that's a very elaborate, very specific near-death experience. When often they're very similar. They're like they have the same components: blue sky, music, go into the light. A feeling of warmth and connection to others. I think they're very like textbook. But anyway, I'm going to read a quote from the creators about the ending.
Please.
It's not for us to define it, but there are the parameters that we've intentionally set up so that there can be an interpretation or 2 or 3 or 4. And that is for people that want to participate in the movie once the credits roll. That's what we're excited about, Beck told The Wrap. We always said the movie as a whole, and this ending in specifically are conversation pieces that hopefully are delivering some sort of introspection that you can look at your own relationship to belief or atheism or whatever it is that you have in your life and find some sort of conversation, whether it's with yourself or with a friend or a partner or a family member. And then Woods added, we're so excited to hear how the ending hits people. Some people take it very literally. Some people don't even see things that happen in the frame that maybe would affect their interpretations. And it's been a fascinating experience hearing what people think.
So we went some other friends to the movie too, and they even had a different interpretation than any of us, is they interpreted that Chloe East made it out of the house. But then, as soon as like the butterfly lands on her hand, she's already died at that point. And
I thought, and I could buy that. I guess.
And it's kind of like the snow is like fallen, and she's in her version of heaven, and her friend Sophie Thatcher's with her.
I think if she died, in my interpretation, if I think she died outside. In my opinion. Will, did the director say anything else about?
But this film isn't an attack on religion; it's an attack on control.
Mm-hmm.
And have either of you seen Speak No Evil?
No, but I
there's a line, they literally use the same line.
Yeah,
it's the same line.
Because you let me.
Yeah. Well,
why'd you do that? Why'd you do this? Because you.
Yeah. Why'd you do this? Because they let me.
I do think it would be cool to briefly describe the Mormon reaction to this movie so far.
Yeah.
It only just released.
Wow.
Doug Anderson, a spokesperson for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in a statement released Wednesday night, said the church supports its nearly 80,000 missionaries and others who serve in the faith, quote, by providing a through regular program of physical and emotional safety training. Our commitment is to foster a culture of respect, empowerment, and safety for all individuals. The statement also noted that the movie is, quote, a work of fiction and is not based on actual events, and lamented that it portrays graphic violence toward women. Quote, any narrative that promotes violence against women because of their faith or undermines the contributions of volunteers runs counter to the safety and well-being of our communities. We encourage open discussions and constructive dialogue regarding media portrayals of our faith and their impact on society. Together, we can advocate for stories that portray people of faith with respect, that uplift audiences and inspire positive change in our world. And so basically, they felt that the church seems to feel that it was, casting missionaries in a bad light, suggesting that it was dangerous and thus not very respectful. I will also add, though, that other missionaries within the faith after this movie began saying, oh, this kind of, this didn't happen to me, but the fear I sometimes felt on mission trips, that is real. Whereas other missionaries said, no, I didn't have that experience. I would still do it again. I'd have my children do it. So I think it's a pretty nuanced response, even if the church seems against its betrayal. And then Chloe East, who was Mormon, said that initially she was hesitant to do the movie because a lot of her friends are still Mormon. She's connected to the community. She didn't want it to be some kind of cruel betrayal, but she found that there was she thought the depiction was positive. And I would agree. I think by the end of the movie, it shows the girls as the strong and resilient, and partially because of their faith and partially because of just who they are. So that's my takeaway. And that's
I think you can walk away. That's what we talked about at the beginning of this, is this just, I think it's more of a discussion piece than it is determined religion, is your faith is real, in terms of believing in a religion, or that the religion is bad, religion is good. It's not giving you that. It's giving you the opportunity to really think more critically and analyze. And yeah, I don't think it's not at all a negative portrayal of Mormonism whatsoever. I think it does make you think critically, which I think is absolutely important to do.
The film doesn't talk down to any religious group.
It doesn't. No,
because the girls are so strong in their responses to him. That's why it's not. Yeah, I agree.
I think like a lot of things, it's based off of marketing and secondhand hearsay. Yeah, it's based off hearsay. Like a lot of religious groups who respond to various forms of media, without seeing it,
like a reactionary thing.
Similar.
Okay, well, Will, is there anything else that you heard or that you had thoughts on that you wanted to share?
I just think, like Joe said, it's a conversation piece. I like what it has to say, and I don't inherently find it cinematic. But I enjoyed having this discussion, and I think it's fun to talk about.
And I'll just add that there is one voice that says, go see this movie for the cinematic experience, even if we have two voices that
I'd say go see it, yeah.
But also, the conversation is what matters the most. That's what's most fun.
Queer Cinema Catchup is a podcast talking about movies, TV, and miscellaneous topics through the queer lens. Will, thank you so much for joining us. Will is also now going to be a producer and really...
And by the time this comes out, he will have already been a producer for a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're saying welcome, but really it's more like thank you for your help so far.
Of course. I'm so happy to support my fellow queers.
Bye, guys.
Bye.